What's up? Um, so when I was 18, I was a freshman at UT, and over the summer, during the summer orientation, I had joined this um, gay, lesbian, bisexual support group, and like met a whole bunch of folks, some folks that I still know to this day. And when my dad came to visit that first semester at UT, he saw that I was like running around with all of these people, and he's like, the birds of a feather flock together. Are you gay? And I was just like, like, I'm not going to tell you till you stop yelling. But eventually, yes, I came out and like let him know that I was in fact gay. And he told me, you're gay, you're black, and you're a woman. That's 3 strikes against you. And I remember being like, yeah, no shit, in the back of my head. But also just kind of like knowing that that's kind of the thing that I had as a chip on my shoulder. Not since forever, really. I'd say like when it had been put in such plain spoken terms, I was always somebody who played better when angry. But as an 18-year-old, you don't know what it necessarily means to play better in this particular arena, right? So like, for me, that meant sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and lots of it. So when I, came out and started university, for me, it wasn't about trying to be a walk-on on the basketball team or even my academics. It was really just like, let's go be amongst the people and, get some, just get some life on you, get some adventure, under your belt. And, that was really fun and informative and formative. Took 7 years, but whatever. And it was an amazing experience. And like, when I think about, what I want to tell my students about what makes the college experience great or why it's such an important a time in your life, it's really for me about like that self-exploration, and coming to just own who you are. And I mean, like, truly own who you are and get into it. You know what I mean? And I feel like in the course of being out and like being in the life, as they used to say, I've met a ton of people who weren't authentically okay with who they were, and in not being okay with who they were total assholes. And it's funny, I work in these, education arenas where people are well-intentioned and they have their hearts in the right place, but they kind of miss the mark on a lot of things. And these last 2 weeks, not even like these last 2 weeks, like this week, in 2 of my separate professional arenas, like the school that I work at under the auspices of the organization that I work for, in both arenas we're talking about this idea of, cultural consciousness, and what that means and what that entails. And I think ultimately, like, folks are trying to address the elephant in the room that is racism, that is sexism, that is homophobia, transphobia, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't want to get too uncomfortable. They want it to be enlightening. They want it to be, informative, but not necessarily transformative. And I think ultimately to engage with these systems of oppression and acknowledge them for what they are, it does transform you without question. And if it doesn't, then you're not really, I don't know what that was. You're not really doing the damn thing. You know what I mean? And Monday, I sit in, my workspace at the school, and they're doing a PD, and the principal invites me to be a part of the PD because they're talking about cultural bias, and they're talking about, or beginning to have that conversation about those things. And at the end of reading this article about unpacking white privilege, and she's like, we're going to go through a facilitation process of the 4 A's, argue, agree, assess, something else. And there's crickets, like fucking crickets. And ultimately I looked at the group of folks, and I was like, let me get this straight. We work in a marginalized, underserved school full of black and brown kids, in a society that is, you know, at wit's end in terms of the culture wars. We're seeing shootings on the daily in terms of young people of color. We've got a president who is, you know, by virtue of his kind of low-key condoning hate speech and the hate mongers out there, we've seen an uptick in all sorts of rowdy, racist, fucked up behavior, and you guys have got nothing to say. Like, absolutely nothing. And at some point, some folks like started to, you know, chime in and chirp up, but I'm just like, there, you know, are 1, 2, myself, 3, 4 women of color, 5 women of color, 2 men of color on staff. The principal's white, most of the teachers are white, and they have nothing to say. And I'm not talking about the principal, because the principal was the one who wanted to bring this conversation to the fore to get folks to understand that if you can't address those issues, you're not really going to be able to get to the bigger issues of really being able to give these kids a quality education. But like this idea that, you know, you're just going to hear about it, but like it's not actually going to penetrate, you know? Like it's not actually going to get into the viscera of who you are. And that's ultimately what needs to happen if you want to, you know, transform and have a world without racism, a world without classism, equal rights for equal pay, all of that shit. None of that can happen unless you're willing to profoundly change how you engage the world. And I'm not saying, well, maybe I am saying that it's time to disrupt or dismantle the system. Maybe that's exactly what I'm saying, because as the realization that I've come to in these last couple of years is that the system's working exactly how it's supposed to ultimately, isn't it? Like it was never designed for the likes of me, you know, the one at the intersections of race, gender, class, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't supposed to work for me. You know, I've always described, well, recently I've started describing it as like being, you know, at the shittiest table in one of the best restaurants when I had to think about what it means to be a black queer woman in the United States. But having said that, that's exactly how it was supposed to go. You know what I mean? Those are the implications of capitalism. Those are the implications of the racism that was born from that. All of those things. You know what I mean? And you know, and I said as much. You know, I was like, maybe we need to start operating from the position that like these systems are operating exactly how they're supposed to. And if we're not okay with how these systems are operating, what can we do in our individual immediate arenas or spheres of influence to actually affect that change? And yeah, unequivocally, it starts with the individual, but we're a tiny school. You know, we're effectively the size of an after school